where Israel and Hezbollah are trading heavy rocket and missile fire. Israel says hundreds of Hezbollah rockets targeted northern Israel yesterday, causing some injuries there. This morning, the Israeli military launched new air attacks on Lebanon's capital, Beirut. Deborah Patta has more on the violence.
An exchange of fire that is escalating. This residential building, one of many taken down over the weekend, as Israel launched one of its deadliest strikes on central Beirut, killing more than 80 people, said the Lebanese health ministry. Israel's defense force said it was targeting Hezbollah strongholds embedded in the civilian population. But this is not targeting, said Lebanese resident Abir Dawich. They attacked peaceful people in their homes. Israel also felt Hezbollah's wrath yesterday. This is the moment a rocket smashed into the roof of a building in northern Israel. The Iran-backed group fired a heavy barrage of rockets from Lebanon. Israel says around 250, most of which were intercepted. The renewed intensity of the war between Israel and Hezbollah comes despite American officials saying a ceasefire between the two sides could be imminent. For CBS Mornings, I'm Deborah Patta in East Jerusalem.
Funny how nobody questions why all the buildings being brought down and this footage is being done in Lebanon. Yeah. Ethan is about to have interview Loner Box on his podcast saying, I want to offer alternatives to Hasan. He's a super smart guy who's very knowledgeable. I mean, good. Great. Yeah. My man said, I hate Hasan. It's time for Temu Hasan. Let's have a guy who at least is like somewhat critical of Israel, but still ultimately believes that believes in many of the things that Israel is doing as like kind of righteous. But hey, he's like he's critical of the Benjamin Netanyahu administration, you know? So this is the right kind of opinion to have in terms of being pro-Palestine. And the wrong kind of people are the people like Hasan who are just too radical and irrational. They're actually harming the cause. Yeah, this is just a way for Ethan to channel destiny without actually openly platforming him because he's so scared. Just put destiny on, little bro. Just put him on. You know, that's it. He's just so terrified because of one, the metric ton of horseshit that Destiny has said about him. And two, he's worried that like the remainder of his audience is going to be like, oh man, yeah, what the fuck? This is a bridge too far for me. Don't worry. You've already massaged the narrative enough that your subreddit is like completely fucking captive. Completely captured by the brigaders. It's turned into a fucking snark subreddit for me, just like r/destiny is. You know? Yeah. Mr. The IDF doesn't target children. It's cool, man. It is what it is. We'll talk about how devastating it is that I am a terrorist supporter and how I've turned a blind eye to anti-Semitism, blah, blah, blah. If you think the anti-Semite of the year is so wrong, why do you share about it so much that you even give it to the title? Don't you think it's giving them recognition they look for attacking you? What? I think it's a title that has no real motion, but I'm still going to maintain my principles and ensure that people understand where I'm coming from, and talk about the damaging impact that organizations like Stop Anti-Semitism, there's not even a real organization, it's just like one lady, are doing to the discourse surrounding anti-Semitism, like consistently packaging actual anti-Semites with people who actually are actively combating anti-Semitism, like myself. What am I supposed to do? Let them call me a fucking anti-Semite? What, are you stupid?
After a conflict that escalated dramatically over the past 2 months, there are now fresh hopes for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. A source says that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has approved the emerging deal in principle, and that the Israeli cabinet is going to be voting on the agreement on Tuesday. This happening as the death toll climbs in Lebanon. Lebanese officials say that dozens were killed in Israeli strikes in Beirut and beyond over the weekend. Lebanon's health ministry says that Israeli strikes have killed more than 3,000 people since mid-September. The IDF says it struck a dozen Hezbollah command centers in Beirut Sunday night. Hezbollah fired some 250 projectiles from Lebanon on Sunday. Some were intercepted by Israel's air defenses. Let's bring in Nick Robertson, joining us live now from Jerusalem. So, Nick, just talk us through what more we know about this potential ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah, including the 60-day transition period and also the fact that the Israeli military would be required to withdraw from southern Lebanon. Take us through that.
Yeah, and I think the indications are not just coming from here in Israel, that this cabinet meeting that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held last night with his members of cabinet and his senior security officials gave rise to this decision to have another cabinet meeting and to move in the direction with some reservations but about the ceasefire. But also we've been hearing that from in the region as well, from outside of Israel, that they feel that a deal is getting close. There's been a significant uptick in the military escalation on both sides. On Sunday, for example, 250 Hezbollah rockets and missiles fired into Israel. That's a huge number. And again, on the Israeli side, a huge number of IDF strikes going into Lebanon at Hezbollah targets. That's symptomatic if we compare it to back in 2006, when there was a similar ceasefire deal was struck back then between Hezbollah and the Israeli government. There was an uptick in violence and exchanges of fire just before the ceasefire. So, you know, some of the atmospherics around this look right. The Prime Minister is indicating the country is moving in that direction. Do
you think the ceasefire deal is happening because they're suffering heavy loss on the ground in southern Lebanon? Yes. It's the most consistent experience with Israeli incursion. They only stand down when they're forced to stand down.
Reservations. I think one of the principal reservations we've heard about is the fact that the Israelis want to be able to strike Hezbollah immediately if they violate the ceasefire during that 60-day period. The foreign minister today laid out equal terms. Hezbollah pulling back 30 miles north of the border, north of the Litani River. That's back to an old UN-agreed position that Hezbollah hadn't stuck to. They want as well, the foreign minister was saying, for Hezbollah not to be allowed to rebuild and rearm itself going forward. That seems to be a big ask in a sovereign country. But that's one of the things he's saying. But I think that perhaps the sharpest thorn in the side of the Israeli Prime Minister at the moment is his hard-right members of his cabinet. Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, today said he told the Prime Minister that absolutely not, that he should not stop fighting Hezbollah, that they were weakened and that this was the moment to crush them. And he said, you know, continue, continue, continue. Those were his words, he said to the Prime Minister. So it seems to be where the direction he may vote in tomorrow. Obviously, the Prime Minister has time to discuss this with all the different parties in his coalition before then. But it does appear that what we're hearing from the Prime Minister's office is that they feel reasonably confident that this will go through.
Yeah, because of course, as we touched on, any ceasefire agreement would have to be approved by the Israeli cabinet. As you point out, they are set to convene tomorrow, Tuesday. So, Nick, I also understand that you've been speaking to Palestinians in the West Bank and talking to them really about what a Trump presidency would mean for the potential rise of Israeli settlers in the area. Just take us through that.
Yeah, one of the big concerns is that President Trump's pick for ambassador is Mike Huckabee, a former Arkansas governor, an evangelical Christian who takes the same view as settlers here, that he's also said that he doesn't believe there are Palestinians, that he thinks that Israel has the right to the West Bank. It's the occupied West Bank. International law says this is land that Israel is occupying. But the settlers in this country believe the same thing as Huckabee.
Illegally. Occupying illegally. In direct violation of international law. Yeah, he almost said Palestinian land and he stopped himself. Kind of crazy at this point. The only difference between Netanyahu and his political opposition is just which civilians they'd like to target, Palestinians and the Lebanese. Yeah. Like Benjamin Netanyahu's opposition is demanding that he hit Lebanon harder. That's the American-backed guy in the corner there. The general. Is it wrong if I think that occupying is enough for me? I understand your point. Is it because who's saying it? No, it's deliberate. You have to mention that it's an illegal occupation. It's cool that the supposedly more tolerant, more moderate voice, as we've talked about before, like the moderate generals are sometimes even more bloodthirsty than the actual Likudniks. Okay? Obviously, the worst of the worst are always going to be people to the right of the Likudniks, the Itamar Ben-Gvirs.
Zionism.
Oh, here's Matt Lieb, Daniel Monte, Elik and Alon talking about liberal Zionism. You know, let's hear what liberal Zionism, what they have to say about. These are anti-Zionist Jews. Let's see what they have to say about liberal Zionism.
Is basically you get to have a little bit of genocidal right-wing Zionism, but as a treat. You know, only when you're like feeling bad. You know, it's like mostly you consider yourself like on a diet from fascism, but then occasionally you have a cheat day.
By the way, the same principle we saw in America. This is not like a Jewish thing at all, okay? This is a fascist thing. This is a liberal attitude. It's universal almost. Every single person that was angry at like black and brown people or Muslims for not voting for Kamala Harris, that immediately turned around after the election results and said, like, I'm going to call ICE on my Latino neighbors, like undocumented family members. Like, they are exhibiting the exact same tendency that they are identifying here in Israeli society and amongst liberal Zionism. It is when you don't have any issues whatsoever with the actual fascist policies but you simply want your side to win, and you also want to maintain a moral superiority over the dumb reactionaries. It is straight up the same exact principle that we saw with Democrats that said that they were going to call ICE on their fucking Latino neighbors that voted for Trump and on their immediate family members. That is the same principle behind like liberal Zionism. It's like, oh, Benjamin Netanyahu's in the wrong. We don't like him. But also simultaneously, you know, we don't really mind what he's doing right now in Gaza all that much.
Just one ethnic cleansing.
Yeah. Just one. Just a little bit of genocide before.
If you don't eat your meir, you can't have any kahana.
Liberal Zionism is basically.
Oh. I can't tell how many times I've said the things you're saying for years to family, and it's only now hitting. There's so much work to do. It's nasty. It's all good. I mean, as long as it's hitting, then that's a good thing. It's people who present some semblance of opposition to the genocidal party without coming to the recognition that it is a genocide, without openly admitting that it is an apartheid. Or even if they do sometimes recognize that it is an apartheid, they'll still hold back from what must be done, or rather turn around and say, but everyone opposing this apartheid, this genocide, are actually also in the wrong as well for a minutia or for all these different reasons. Just something to consider, a plethora, not minutia, but for marginal differences. What is this? Israel not holding back on the Nazi messaging? Yeah. Smotrich, it's possible to conquer Gaza and reduce the population by half within 2 years. Nice. Israeli Minister of Finance and de facto governor of West Bank. I think it's good to understand this and compare it to the Democratic Party, by the way, in the United States of America, because like a lot of you experienced this, a lot of you saw this. Apparently the phrasing is a bit different. Thanks, Israel Hayom, for doing a shitty job like always. It is possible to create a situation where Gaza's population in 2 years will be less than half its current size through voluntary emigration. The moderates that care more about the aesthetics of civility will always cave and capitulate to the fascists. Fascists do not care about that. They will use it to their advantage and they'll break the systems. Okay? Apartheid is bad, and if the roles were reversed, it would still be wrong, and those in power would cynically say you're being Islamophobic or anti-Christian. Has no basis on who's doing the bad things, and only based on the bad things being done, and against those who wish to do it. Yeah. Did you hear the unhinged take for canceling Ana de Armas for dating the president of Cuba's son? Yes, I did. Do you dislike the Democrats and liberals more than Republicans and conservatives? No. Of course not. Are you hoping to educate liberals to your side? Yes. I'm hoping to educate anyone that is willing to listen, to understand my position.
And there is a strong right-wing group within the Israeli cabinet that also believe that and want to annex the whole of the West Bank. And this is what the new potential ambassador is going to walk into here.
There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria.
Mike Huckabee, an at times controversial visitor to Israel, looks set to return as President-elect Donald Trump's pick to be ambassador. If he does, he'll have plenty of friends. Yeshai Fleischer, an activist and settler, has met with Huckabee many times.
He happens to be a great friend of Israel and of the kind of Israel that I represent, that lives in its ancestral heartland, which is Judea and Samaria, what on CNN may be called the West Bank.
Even the occupied West Bank.
Right, even occupied West Bank, but we don't see it that way.
But the history of the West Bank is complex and deeply disputed. Under international law, Israel is deemed to be occupying the land. Huckabee will be arriving when settler violence against Palestinians is significantly up over Trump's last administration. And the Israeli government's claim to the land is at its most politically charged in years. Powerful right-wing nationalists in the government want to annex the entire occupation.
Yeah, notice how the CNN anchor is not saying that it is an illegal occupation and like will avoid using that language specifically. What he says, the international community says it's
occupying the land.
Right,
says Israel's occupying the land.
But we don't see it that way.
But the history of the West Bank is complex and deeply disputed.
It's not complex at all. Saying this is complex is just basically lying. There's nothing complex about it.
International law, Israel is deemed to be occupying the land. Huckabee will be arriving when settler violence against Palestinians is significantly up over Trump's.
Do you understand? Do you see what I'm saying? When I say words have meaning, and the passive language that is being utilized here is not even being utilized, is being weaponized here, and is a great disservice to the truth.
Last administration. And the Israeli government's claim to the land is at its most politically charged in years. Powerful right-wing nationalists in the government want to annex the entire occupied West Bank. So too does Fleischer.
We're still fighting a war of liberation for that piece of land.
And is Huckabee going to be helpful in that liberation?
I think he will be.
50 miles north, on the fringes of the West Bank Palestinian village Badala, Israeli diggers are gouging out a new barrier through the middle of Palestinian farms on land they say is a security risk. The Israeli government is in the...
Like, that's insane, dude. You are framing it as though you're framing it with like their justifications without talking about the entirety of the international community's perspective on this, without actually factoring in, you know, real laws surrounding this sort of thing and how unjustifiable, how immoral, or how illegal it is. It's like one of those perfect triple Monty style situations where it's an act that is both immoral and also unjustifiable and illegal. Okay? You rarely ever get the trifecta. And yet, when you fucking hear from the mainstream media on an act such as this one, like so openly cruel and such a clear-cut demonstration of international rules, they literally are just like, well, Israel says it's at the behest of their security operations.
process of taking more land. The head of the council tells me, claiming no security threats here. What the media is talking about with Huckabee is already happening, he says. These actions are part of Israel's systematic policies to occupy and annex all of this land. Their goal is to drive us out of this area. He shows me documents he says prove Palestinian families have owned this land for more than a century.
This is the other side of the equation, which is holy moly, I'm getting botted into oblivion right now. Look. Oh, it stopped. This just happened. I just got mass botted, dude. Look. Anyway. What's the point of botting? I don't know. I don't understand why this piece appears to be critical of Israel on the surface, but is simultaneously sanitizing it. I'm going to tell you another thing that like defenders of America's foreign allies engage in that is yet another way that you can do propaganda without like openly admitting that you're doing propaganda, openly showing that you're doing propaganda without showing your hand. Americans, just like everybody else, trust institutions, right? They trust nation states. So even if a nation state is ultimately lying all the fucking time, like Israel, there is still going to be a lot of unearned trust that the average person places upon a foreign ally and state statements rather than a non-state actor. Even though the non-state actor in this story, the random Palestinian like village leader or whatever, is absolutely correct. So if you match up what he's saying with what the Israeli government is claiming in terms of security interests, most people's takeaway from that is going to be, well, I kind of trust the state. Like, I would rather trust the state than this like scary brown guy whose language I don't understand, who I've been primed into thinking is a terrorist anyway. That's just how this works. So under the auspices of impartiality, you end up providing cover for the party that is engaging in a metric ton of oppression and the party that is actively harming others, actively violating international human rights.
As we talk, Israeli troops show up to serve an eviction notice on the farmer below. He's been told his buildings are unlicensed. What he's saying is
they're providing cover for this.
Is the official document informing him that he has to be off this land by 9 a.m. on the 4th of December. Otherwise, all of this, he loses it. Khalid is 60 years old, heartbroken. I don't know how to describe my feelings to you, he says. This is my livelihood. My children rely on it. Then someone comes along and takes it away. You can't argue with them. We have no power. They have the power. In the villages around here, they call this silent annexation. Little by little, the Palestinians losing their land to Israeli settlement expansion.
If Israel unilaterally annexes large parts, large swaths of the West Bank, this is not going to fly well in the Arab world.
Pincus is a former Israeli diplomat, believes Huckabee's settler friends could harm Trump's bigger objectives, Saudi-Israel normalization.
He's going to be pressured by the Saudis, the Qataris, and the Emiratis to strike a bigger deal. He's going to want to build on the Abraham Accords.
Saudi Arabia very...
I think that one of the unintentional consequences of like permanent annexation of the West Bank and the Bantustan structure that will be implemented in both the West Bank and Gaza is that there's not a single person at that point that will ever claim that there's a two-state solution, basically. And battle lines will harden on this front. And more people will start seeing it the way I've been seeing it for quite some time, which is that Israel already runs a singular sovereign state in the region. It just happens to be an apartheid state. They are Bantustans right now, but there's some semblance of like personal governance there. Permanent annexation of West Bank being codified and being made permanent by the Trump administration would basically be the final step in this process, the final solution. But there's just no way out of this other than permanent ethnic cleansing, like ethnic displacement or permanent ethnic cleansing in general of the Palestinian population, the entirety of the indigenous population. Dude, please stop sending me the indigenous economics. Like Rachel, again, please. I know you literally constantly ask me about this indigenous Harvard economist over and over again. I'm not going to sit here and watch a 32-minute video with 400 views from a lecture about the meaning and relevance of indigenous economic theory. Oh my God, Rachel, please stop. Jesus Christ, you've been at this for weeks now. Stop. Not again, Rachel. Okay? No. It's all good. Just don't apologize. But the last time I said no to this, you just kept repeating it. Okay? If you spam something over and over again and I see it and I don't respond to it, just know that, like, you know, I'm probably not gonna watch it. It's probably not. It's all good. It's all good. You don't have to apologize that much. Now I feel bad. I'm sorry.
Soon. The price of which Trump's biggest regional friend, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, says is a Palestinian state.
Maybe there is an opportunity with Saudi Arabia for us, and that is why we're closely coordinating with Saudi Arabia.
The Palestinian Authority's former prime minister believes it's Trump's friends who'll triumph in influencing the Israeli government, not Huckabee's.
This man is not the one who will be dictating the shots. He's a player. He's an important player, but he is not the player. He is not the president.
By the time Huckabee arrives, more land, like Farmer Halid's, will have been seized.
You haven't spoken much on Huckabee yet? No, when the first initial pick came out, I did, but there's no reason to cover him any further than I have already. He's a fucking rabid evangelical Zionist. He is an ultra. Okay?
What will the future hold, he says? It's a question everyone here is asking.